A concept I also would like to introduce to hops is the concept of opt-ins, which is, funnily enough, the more I type it in code, the more it sounds like options. But if you expand the hops button, there's a star icon which will take you to the opt-ins. And these are things that I felt users would possibly want to opt in or opt out of, or possibly make changes based on their personal preferences of wanting to use hops. And these are basically things that you can adjust in your preferences, but I'll go over each of them one by one. So the first one is the background color. So me personally, I love having my background color to something strange because it's just funny. Sometimes it cheers me up whenever I'm working to just have all my modals be pink. So if that's something that you would opt to change, you can do that here. You can also opt to just have no color whatsoever and run in what I call predator mode, which is a nice way to just kind of run things to me. So I will give it just a little bit of transparency. The next thing is operator text display. So if I were to select this key and press Q, or press Q and choose sharpen, it will display some information as far as what sharpen has just done. If you are such a pro user that you don't need that information, you can just opt out of that quickly by just having it run just like classic, where it doesn't display any information. To me, I feel it's a little lonely, so that is why the operator text exists, to convey this information more to you as well as provide stats to me, because I just find it interesting to know how many mods I applied, how many mods are left, what angle I just put, and without having to read another tooltip window, I feel I'm able to move a little bit faster. Help scale is another one. Sometimes you'll find that you're working in a view where the help is just way too big. So sometimes over the course of some demos, I will lower this down to something like 0.7, which will make it where the modal help is just a little bit smaller. Sometimes this can help with retina displays if you're working on a surface. However, on this display, one is working just fine. Over time, users have shown to have issues with our 0.7 preference, which we find to be a little bit better at avoiding certain sharpening catches with the bevel at 30 degrees, which is why we have a preference for it. But if you're the type of user who wants to use it as if it were vanilla, you can of course come in and set this to 0.5, which will result in you pressing Q and beveling and getting a 0.5 result by default every time. However, I do of course enjoy having this at 0.7, which is why it's set by that by default. Is something we agreed on years ago and just have become used to. Sometimes new users will come in and think that, using the modals and moving the mouse to the left and to the right is a little bit illogical. And these users I consider to be, I guess, right-handed users. So we have made improvements with our control system to make it where if you're a right-handed user, you can come in and just opt to have it actually work backwards if you want it to get smaller as you move to the left and bigger to the right. However, I've actually been using it so long that the moment this change was introduced to me, I was jarred by it and was like, we have to get this out immediately. But after more contemplation, we realized that it simply just needs to be delegated to a toggle for users who prefer such methods. The new array system has caused a degree of controversy. However, we of course are gathering all those comments and suggestions in order to build a stronger, better array. However, at this time, if you are wanting to opt for the classic array in the Q menu, you can just change that from ST3 to default, which will result in you being able to array using the classic version where you move the mouse and it had mouse wrap. However, after using ST3 array long enough, I have found that this is kind of a step backwards. So in the event that you are wanting to try them out interchangeably, you're able to do so through this opt-in right here. So we'll go back to ST3 and I can already just at least enjoy being able to move this precisely, scale in and out, get my view just right, and just get this array exactly the way I want, as well as tab into the experimental expanded mode, which we still plan on expanding down the road. In addition to that, there's been a contingency of users that have had an issue with the circle being an element. Circle was actually kind of a debug thing that ended up making it into the final version. However, we should have probably removed it or at least shrunk it down to a smaller size in order to minimize the confusion with it. So for that reason, you can also choose to have the circle be a dot. And this is something that really is just a scale of the circle but it looks like a dot in the view and just sticks with the cursor. So maybe this will help you, make your way around this a little bit better. However, we do plan on making some improvements in regards to the ST3 array system. However, I still opt to use ST3 and just keep it as circle. So I'll press Control N and make a new scene. And we've already talked about material scroll. So one of the changes that we discussed quite a bit that was a little bit questionable was the ability to have the materials generated by blank material be the same in the viewport as they are in your render material generation. So I'm using Box Cutter a little bit to make a few cuts, and we'll just select everything and press Control or Alt M in order to bring up the material submenu, and we will control click material scroll to just jump through material scroll. And you can see that these are just kind of random materials. If I press tab and jump over to render, you can see that, or look dev, you can see that the look dev results are a lot different. And if I press tab to jump back to solid, you can see that I'm still getting these kind of candy colors. And this is a way that I like to work, because when I'm looking at it in the viewport, I'm looking at things in a little bit more abstract than the render. So I don't want to actually get those two things connected. However, if I were to select everything and at least put a bevel on everything, maybe lower it down a little bit, and we can go under modifier and just hit weighted normal to fix the shading. We can toggle blank mapping similar in the viewport. And if I press Alt M and we control click material scroll, you can see that the materials are a lot truer to what the result would be if I looked at it in render. And while this does look cool, I find that looking at some of these very dark shaded materials in my viewport is just a little too dark for my taste, and having the reflective values be so variable can just kind of offset me a little bit. So that is why the opt-in option for blank matte similar to viewport exists. So by just toggling that off, we can just go back through our material scroll and go back to just getting the candy colored materials that you probably all know and love. The next one I want to talk about is radial twist render edit toggle. So this one has been improved. Some users might already be familiar with it because they were the ones who requested it. So by default, with this thing off, what it means is that if I were to take this object and give it a twist 360, we look at the modifiers in the control tilde, we can see that all the renders are turned off. And what this means is that I can immediately just go in and just start box cutting without any regard to sorting going haywire. And this was kind of just a temporary hack I put in just to help me make it through the day on a particular project. However, users have found this to be a little bit problematic. So as a result, and also I kind of really messed this mesh up here, I should probably delete these sides at least to make the mesh manifold, and then it's solid. And then I could shift click in order to roll the sharpening down, if I were talking about how to fix this, by the way. But some users don't actually want to work this way. Some people don't want to tab into edit mode and see the mesh at the same time as they're modifying it like I'm doing here. I can just kind of modify it and just tab back into object and just see those results take place. So alternatively, you have the option to turn this off or turn this on, which will bypass the render edit mode toggle behavior that I particularly enjoyed. And so if we were to go in and use a twist 360 again, you can see that when I tap into edit mode, you only see the real object. So there is a chance you could go in and bevel the wrong side. Maybe it's the right side depending on the type of designer you are, but it is a preference. And if we press Control tilde, we can look at the helper and look at our modifiers. We can see that all of the renders are on, meaning that if I were to box cut this, the sorting could have a chance of going haywire, but that is a risk that you have to take whenever you have it set up to be in a logical rendered way. But now at least whenever you render, you don't have to go in and make sure the renders are on for your radial array if that's something that you opt into. So the next one I want to talk about is 2cam jump. So previously we added the ability to kind of create a camera that you could create that would orbit your scene, and this was to replace the long workflow of creating drivers and all of that and talking about drivers all the time and just having a section of workflow and videos talking about drivers. Instead, you can just have no object selected, press Q and just choose add camera, and it will jump you into camera, and it will even select your camera, so you can press GZZ and actually get your camera just how you want. And then when you press Control spacebar, it will just play your 360 animation. So some users may not want to actually jump into the camera and make it the active camera. So 2cam jump is something that's able to be turned off, and whenever you just add a camera, it will just add it, and then you can just jump into it and modify it whenever. And that's just in the event that you want to, work on that angle on the side, manually, and just get the camera exactly the way you want before you get in and begin adjusting things. So the next one in the list is the viewport set render. And this one is a favorite of mine, but I found that maybe having it on could be problematic, and that is that whenever you're pressing Alt-VV and you're jumping through your HDRs, you may want to not have to press R in order to set it to your render afterwards. Maybe you just want to press Alt-VV, set this to be the way that you want it to look, and just click to apply and just be done. So that is what the final opt-in here, viewport plus set render. By having this on, we can press Alt-VV, and you can see that 2 renders already set to true, so no matter what I do here. And you can also see that my memory isn't jumping up very high because I'm not having to deal with crazy large HDRs. I can just click to apply, and if we look at this in a render, we can see that everything's set for the render as far as HDR and the rotational accuracy and everything according to what I was just looking at in the look dev. And for me, this supercharges my ability to set up renders on the fly because I can quickly just take this cube, roll it through materials until I find a combination I like, and that's not a combination. I want something on a little bit on the darker side. I can press Q, add lights, just scroll through until I find a rig that I like. Press Shift A, maybe add a plane instead. Actually, let's delete that cube. We'll S80, G-1, give this a blank material, and that is basically all I need in order to set up a quick render. Just using the system, I could just press Alt-V, go back and look dev, change it to something else if I want something a little bit more dramatic, because I have so many HDRs I've collected over time. Like I said, just check out SIBL and get on that, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to build yourself a pretty nice collection, scroll through them, and I could just click, and then going over to render, I can see that I immediately have the result that I want for whenever I press Control F12 and just quickly render these things out.